Murder following a stabbing in Suffolk. Well, it's time to take a look through the Sunday papers now. I'm joined by the former Development Secretary, Claire Short, by the former British Ambassador to the United States, Christopher Mayer, and by the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, David Mellor. And we know what we're going to be discussing straight off. So much happening on this story, Syria. And Claire, start us with Matthew Dancona in The Telegraph, a nauseating, preening and grubby carnival of inaction. I take it you don't agree?
Absolutely not. And the papers are full of this. Before they knew that America was going to follow Britain and allow its parliamentarians to have their say, they're denouncing Miliband or denouncing Cameron, denouncing the House of Commons. And look at this, supercilious. And I actually think, Obama said it's not time sensitive to respond. Why don't we discuss, because it seems to me flinging a few cruise missiles around doesn't solve anything. Taking a bit more time to say, look at the whole situation in Syria and look for a solution is what we should do.
But I think on that, Claire, on that, Obama said, we've got time. We've got to look at the sequence of events, the reason why the rush. We know, Christopher, we know why the rush was on, because the weekend before, Obama had said, we're going to be bombing this weekend.
Absolutely, and he rang up Cameron and said, I'm going...
I thought it'd be Sunday night.
That's why.
Sunday night or Monday morning.
But that's now why he's pausing, because of what happened in Westminster.
Well, what's emerging, I think, very clearly from American sources in the last 24 hours is how much he was influenced by David Cameron's defeat in the House of Commons. And this gave him real pause. And there's a very good story in the New York Times today, which we don't have in front of us, in which he completely surprises his advisors by saying, hey, in the light of what's happened in London, I think we ought to look at this again and go to Congress.
So he took this decision off his own bat, more or less?
Well, it seems that...
he is the president.
You're surrounded by advisors.
But Dermot, the key thing, he's not only president, he's also commander-in-chief. And he has to think like the commander-in-chief. And there's one story that says, and this is very plausible, I think, that he was thinking that maybe later on, during his presidency, he may have to do something similar with Iran. So he'd better get this right, and the best way of doing it was to consult Congress.
Well, but has he not ceded then, as Commander-in-Chief, the right to declare war?
A lot of Americans are saying this is not what a president should do, because the War Powers Resolution and all that is a subject of huge controversy.
Exactly.
But he's done it.
Okay.
He's done it.
David, let's get back to this article. There's part of it that...
there certainly is, but just on Obama, it will be the legacy of his presidency that he talks a talk, but he doesn't walk the walk, and he should have got on with it. But I think...
But slowing down America rushing to war all the time might be a good thing for America, apart from the war.
I don't agree with you, and could I maybe state my position, having sat patiently here?
Shut up.
What Matthew Dancona puts his finger on, and he's right, is he said self-evidently Cameron's political intelligence was faulty and the government's whipping operation lacklustre. As a veteran of days under Mrs. Thatcher, when whips, I remember one whip who was 20 stone, David Lightband, pinning one Tory backbencher against a wall, and the fellow started to cry. Okay, now
back in the old days, proper whipping.
Well, if you're going
them with violence,
if you're
That's
going,
what we want.
if you're going to fight, going to ask Parliament to determine something, again, it should be executive action. You absolutely have to get the operation right. I think what Cameron did was he thought he was going to be backed by Miliband. Because you see, the extraordinary thing was not that 30 Conservative members of Parliament voted against the government, but that 31 Conservative members of Parliament, including 10 government ministers, were allowed to absent themselves from the vote. They lost by 13. This is ineptitude, and this is slightly, I think, one of the tragedies of David Cameron. And Dancona also points this out about the small coterie of people around him in Downing Street. His moral leadership on this was absolutely right.
Okay, we're going to get back to that.
But what he didn't do, he was like a child in a firework factory with a box of matches. He didn't get anything else right.
For the first time in a long time, we're proud of the House of Commons for causing pause and making America look again. That's good for our democracy.
Quite a rare moment to be proud of the House of Commons.
Exactly.
Parliamentary sovereignty. Christopher, we'll continue to discuss the story, but through the prism of the papers, and this more on the special relationship you've picked out in the Mail, there's someone writing at the bottom of that page as well, you may recognise.
This is bloke Christopher Mayer writing on the bottom of the page for the Mail on Sunday, and what is interesting, I'm not mentioning this totally out of narcissism, but because it just shows how British newspapers were caught on the hop, as we all were, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening yesterday, by this bombshell announcement by the President. And the headline on my story turns out to be the opposite of what I was actually writing, namely the proof that the special relationship is as strong as ever. I believe in a strong relationship with the United States, but I think the phrase special relationship is an idealized sentimentalization of a really strong pragmatic relationship. And that was what I was writing about, and saying that I didn't think our relationship would be damaged one jot or tittle by the vote on Thursday.
But that was also David, just bring in you the story you've picked out there, which is the front of the Mail, saying Obama, I'm going to copy Cameron. Let's show that to people.
Yeah, I mean, that is the Mail on Sunday doing their best for Dave to try and put a good gloss on what he achieved. It was really a cock-up, as indeed I suppose most things in history are. It was a cock-up because he intended to do one thing, but because his staff work was poor and his preparation poor, he didn't. But the fact that Obama has actually followed suit not only shows, in my view, a weakness of resolve on the part of Obama, but also gives Cameron a chance to say that we still influence America. Because, I mean, I believe what Christopher says is absolutely right, that the special relationship had life blown back into it by Tony Blair and spin, because Tony Blair thought that if he did everything that George W. Bush wanted him to do, he could say we had a special relationship with America, in the same way as Christopher Robin had a special relationship with Winnie the Pooh and dragged him up the stairs with his head bumping against every stair behind him.
David, but there is a but here, and the but is it must have occurred to Obama at some point before the British vote that it wouldn't be a bad idea to consult Congress. It must have been an idea that was out there in all the debates. But what gave it life and wind, if you like, was the fact that the British did it and it came out.
Let's just focus in now on Syria, because I think Claire's got the story here, which, this underlies it all. All right-thinking people agree on this. Assad is a war criminal.
No,
it's what to do about him.
And it's a very, very brutal regime. But the opposition now, which started off as a people's movement of all the different people of Syria asking for democracy, has now got nasty Al-Qaeda elements in it. So we haven't got any good guys. The people are suffering horrendously. It's destabilising the region. I think pausing a little and saying just flinging in a few cruise missiles won't solve anything. What should we do about the broader situation in Syria? Can we get a ceasefire? Can we embarrass the Russians by saying your mate is using
What do you think it helps?
weapons?
I mean, on this issue of a peace conference, it's been pushed around for months and months and months. Does Assad need some wriggle room? Because the position, certainly from our own government, is that you must go. That's not really a precondition for negotiations.
I know, that's the problem, isn't it? Because if we've boxed ourselves in there, and a lot of the people, I mean, the Christian community and the Alawites and the secular are sticking with Assad. And of course, a lot of people who supported the move to democracy now say this chaos is horrible, I'd rather have the regime.
See, the problem is, though, if we've designated him a war criminal, we can't really say, we'll allow you to stay in power.
The trouble about designating him a war criminal, and he deserves to be so designated, is it gives him no incentive to, if you like, leave office, surrender, whatever the term is, because he knows he's going to end up in The Hague if he's not careful. But, sorry, Deb, but just to say that I do think this G20 meeting, which is taking place in St. Petersburg again, is an opportunity, particularly for the Americans and the Russians, to try to get something moving.
And I suppose part of Obama's calculation is if I was bombing the place, it's unlikely we'd hardly even be speaking to each other.
No, and also Arab League foreign ministers are meeting today.
But the chances of Russia and America going to get it under present leadership would seem to be slim and none, and Slim's left town. But the problem with Assad...
Never say never.
The problem with Assad is his father, Hafiz al-Assad, who was a brute. And some of these artificial constructs in the Middle East, which were drawn by European powers, they used to say in the Foreign Office, Chris will remember this, Iraq can only be run by a man with a big moustache. Well, the same is true of Syria. I'm not quite sure how far young Assad is actually in charge of that government, but what is absolutely clear is the greatest inhibition to action in Syria by the West is our belief that it may very well be that those who are seeking to replace Assad are worse than him.
Indeed.
And that's the worry.
And that is the complexity of it all, which I think the British public kind of reflected. I want to bring into this, well, man, all about and disagreed with Claire, Tony Blair. Two interventions in the last 7 days through the Times and the Sunday Times.
I've got page 15 of the Sunday Times.
Unrepentant, saying, well, he was shocked by the result in Parliament, but action needs to be taken against Syria.
You see, bless his heart, I think he still sees himself as a great moral force for good. And the tragedy for him is that he's the only one in this country who does see him in that light. I think the fact of the matter is the fact that that David Cameron didn't feel that he could take action in Syria without the consent of Parliament is the legacy of Tony Blair. One of his greatest legacies is that the people of this country do not trust government when they talk about reasons why military action should be taken. And I think a period of silence from Tony Blair would be very useful.
Well,
we heard last weekend he was shuttling between oligarchs' yachts in the south of France, and my view is he should stick at doing that and keep out of
Claire,
this stuff.
I mean, what do you think about it? I mean, the politics of what happened last week in Parliament. Did Cameron offer Miliband a real chance to break with the Blair era here? Because Tony Blair, he wrote in the Times about intervention more or less the same as he's sticking to today in the Sunday Times. And, you know, Miliband, given the shadow he casts over your party.
Straw, who was the Foreign Secretary at the time, saying we're all haunted by Iraq. Extraordinary.
Exactly.
I mean, you think Blair would shut up and go away. The whole country is referring back and saying they didn't give Blix long enough. Now they're saying the inspectors can't report. I mean, I think the corrective to the mistakes of Iraq in the country being more cautious and the Parliament being more cautious, again, I like that. But Blair is unembarrassable.
But he has, I mean, he has, okay, his end conclusion it differs from yours, but he has said a lot of what you've just said to me about the nature of the opposition in Syria, how difficult it all is there, the moderate elements, the extremist elements.
Yeah, but he's,
you know, his analysis
but
is
you
good,
know,
is it
he
not?
said after the coup in Egypt, the military, now there's a big chance for progress and peace. I mean, he has lost the plot. He really has. And he just writes articles at the drop of a hat and saying whatever.
Okay, Sir Christopher?
Well, I was going to say that there's another shadow which he casts over this debate because he so idealised the special relationship in his dealings with Bill Clinton and George W. Bush that it has left a legacy of thinking that if we disagree with the Americans by one iota, the quote-unquote special relationship is deeply bruised and damaged, maybe beyond repair. We've got to get out of this because it's not consonant with the history of British-American relations since the Second World War.
And to that degree, by accident, Cameron may have blundered into a solution to that because he suddenly made Obama, the most powerful man on earth, suddenly feel very lonely. But no, I think the tragedy for Tony Blair is exactly what would happen in Syria. The British should have made clear to the Americans over Iraq. And, you know, I had to travel to Iraq as minister, met Saddam Hussein on a number of occasions. He was an awful man. But the truth was, Saddam Hussein ran a secular society, and no one factored in it would be easy to get rid of Saddam Hussein, but not easy to control what happened thereafter. And exactly the same is true of Syria.
History repeating itself. Some other stories. Got a couple of minutes for some other stories. So, Christopher, you've got the Queen's old super limo, makes 40 grand. Are we going to look at the picture above that as well?
No, well, it's next to two pictures of David Beckham's shrinking pouch, as they say in the Sunday Mirror. No, we're talking about the Queen, though, aren't we?
Indeed.
Well, I think we, in all this very serious discussion we do need a few things to cheer us up, and the fact that our old limo, her old Daimler Super V8 LWB, has been sold for £40,500 with its central armrest with a sliding holder specially made for the royal handbag, ashtray house security lighting controls including blue flashing strobe lights, flashing headlamps and flashing rear lights. All of that, I think,
has your wife bought it, Christopher?
No, she hasn't. But she'd love to, I'm sure.
Claire, we can have a last story from you. You've got the Observer. Low wages, rising bills, while UK's recovery lacks a feel-good factor, which might have been one of the things we were discussing.
I mean, this is deadly serious. The economy is recovering a bit, but a massive chunk of the population is going to get no improvement whatsoever. Britain's becoming more unequal and divided. That's going to change the nature of the country. This is a very serious problem.
And is this the ground that Ed Miliband's going to have to get back to? This is where he's going to make headway if he is going to come across as a credible alternative Prime Minister.
It's not correctable in the lifetime of one government. I mean, Britain's become much more unequal than it was in the 70s, and we need a longer-term strategy to reduce that inequality.
The problem
Miliband should grab it, yes.
We are out of time. Thank you very much.
I was going to agree with that. How can we be out of time?
I'll say you agree. Claire, David, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And to you, Sir Christopher.
Thank you.
And you're watching